Okay, I think we can get started. So, hello everyone, and welcome to my talk about Experience Map, uh, empowering designers and agile teams to navigate and address UX debt. Lot of words. So, let's decipher and understand what these words mean, and then come to Experience Map. So, there's multiple stories which will be going on the slides, and all of them will come together to come to Experience Map. So pay a little close attention. So my name is Mohit, and I'm the UX leader at CDK Global. So if you have ever bought a car from a dealership in US or Canada, you have gone through our softwares in one way or the other format. Uh, these are my socials. You can find me. Happy to connect and collaborate. So as I was talking, right, before we jump into the talk, how many of us are researchers over here? Lovely. Designers? And from the product side? Lovely. So there's something in for everybody. So before we jump into talking about, the experience map, let's talk about some phrases as a UX or a product person you have heard. We do not have time to do any research. Project timelines are very tight. Have any of the researchers heard that? Lovely. Talking about another aspect which researchers or designers have asked in their team, we already know what our users want. We have already spoken to them in the past. Can we just skip research? Lovely. And we know enough, so we can design the screens, so we can develop them. So designers are just a means of producing screens and screenshots which developers can use. So maybe you can talk to users later. So if you relate to things like these, we'll talk in detail about it. Now, the other aspect which product or designers face sometimes, they make nice looking wireframes, but they have not tested it out. And but still, because leadership wants to move quickly, and there's this fancy word called MVP. So whatever you got is MVP, and whatever you couldn't do is post MVP. So I think we all can correlate to that, and a lot of times what happens, designers will design something, it is there in Figma file, but by the time you see the product out, there's a feature which is completely missing. And you get to know when a customer success team comes back to you and tells you, well, you are talking about advanced setting, there's no such feature. And then you go back, look into the product, and you realize, oh, there's no feature. And you go back and talk to the dev or product, and they said, well, we were doing MVP, so we just decided to get rid of it. And finally, the marketing team, just because somebody has launched a product and we have to go to market fast, we even launch half-baked products. So these are the very common problems which we see in the market and industry today. And this is also partly true because of the agile methodology which we are following, where we say that we want to continuously iterate and improve, but we are just focusing on MVP and then the next release and then the next release. So like I said, right, to come to experience maps, you have to start by just understanding the framework of it, how agile teams were formed, how UX came into picture, what is UX debt. Because if I directly jump to experience map, you'll be like, that was experience map. So if you go through that whole journey, it will also equip you very well based on whatever scenario there is. This can act as a framework in your projects. Depending on the timeline, if you know the framework, you know what portion would work fit for you, and then you can t-shirt size it accordingly to your needs. So let's start with agile methodology. So if I have to break it down into simple terms, I see some students are also here. So let's make sure we cover everybody. So it's just a way, rather than doing waterfall where you get all the requirements in hand, every team works together in it all the time. So think about when you go on a trip with your friends where nobody has planned anything out. So you kind of plan on the go and you live one day at a time. So in the same way, you break down the project into different phases and do a continuous improvement on it. Now, how it would look like, a very simple diagram. You have a list of features which you want to work on. From there, and I'll talk about sprint as well. So you pick up which are the most important aspects which you want to work on. And once you have a good groomed backlog, you go into planning, what has to be done, you talk about the feature, then it goes to design, development, and test, and then finally moving to the release phase. And then you have a product feature which is done, and you can have an outcome to it. Now, making it agile Scrum product lifecycle, the only addition what you do is you add a daily Scrum, so you get an update on a daily basis, anybody is getting logged, and you also do a retro. 2 weeks ago, what you did as a mistake, not repeat it again. All good hygienes, everything good. So, Agile was mostly about, as I said, right, multiple teams coming together, working together. So we also have a very global team and working out of different locations, and we wanted to collaborate. So, when we look at our structure and how we are, we have a stakeholder who would talk about, what they're thinking, what products there are, have a conversation with the program manager, and then there would be a team for a particular product, which was formed of Scrum Masters, product owners, testers, and developers. And then there are SMEs who they may go. SMEs, when I say legal team, marketing team, business process team, they'll go and talk to them and keep improving and writing stories for the product. So when Agile was thought about, they only thought about this aspect. There was no designer when Agile framework was initially written. But when UI became the communication between a user and the organization, they realized, there are micro interactions, there are, different set of screens, it communicates. It is, your interface is the face of the organization. And that made them realize, let's put designer into the mix without knowing much. So part of the problems which we face today is not because, product does not want to listen to us or developers don't want to listen to us, because we were retrofitted after the whole framework was created. So, this was not of choice by anybody. So, that's why I would say, empathize with your developers, with your Scrum Masters and product owners as well. Now, in this continuous improvement and iteration where everything keeps changing, if you take a step back and think about what is constant, team members come and go, features get updated, the only common aspect you have is the time. So when I say time, you can never have more than 365 days in a year unless it's a leap year, but one day in a project won't make a lot of difference. So typically, most of the organizations do it like this. They break the year into quarters. Some start from July and some start from January. So, depending on your organization, fill the gap. And every quarter will typically have 6 sprints. And some would do a month of it, so they'll have 3 sprints. So typically what happens is sprint 0 goes for planning, and last sprint goes for releasing whatever you have built during that quarter. So a lot of people will say, we do quarterly release. We do an annual release. You'll know how often the product gets released. So if you're into really a SaaS working company, there would be teams who are working on specific features within a product, and they are making their releases. Now, going further, we have talked about release, we have talked about product. Let's also understand the concept about UX debt. So, when we initially start building something and we cut corners because we want to meet a deadline, or we have a senior leadership which wants the product sooner than later, we cut some corners. And sometimes you have to do it. And when we cut corners, we are gathering UX debt, which at times may take more effort, more money, and more resources if it was done during the first time. So how does it look like? Typically, this is your this is how your burn down should be when you started. But due to some constraints, there was a competitor in the market who was going with the same features, and you realize, well, if I don't go now, they will capture the entire market. So there may be various reasons why you want to go to market quickly or why you want to launch the product. So I'll talk about that aspect as well. But regardless of whatsoever reason, you took a leap of faith and you met the deadline, but you gathered some debt. And what happens with that is, so think about this. This is what a designer had designed as a product. And because of meeting the deadline, you left these many blocks or features or functionality, and you ended up this as a delivered product. Now, it will not have all the added value which this has, but if you have made sure that some fundamental parts of it is there, and if there is a competitor, at least you can still have your product and people are adopting it while you do incremental improvements. We'll talk about that aspect in detail as well. Now, the problem is we do not, even UX designers, I think, we don't talk about old UX debt during our PI planning or any of the plannings. While technical teams do that always, they have a backlog where they go back and say, well, we have technical debt. I think it's a strong practice we should start talking about. If you have built a product, do you have UX debt? Identify it, document it, because that would be very helpful. But we often ignore this, and then we do another release, and another release comes like that. So you keep gathering more and more debt over the period of time. Now, why is debt important? And like I was saying, well, rather than optimal launch, I could launch sometimes early, and there may be various reasons. So let's talk about what would be those various reasons. So I take this example to talk about minimum viable product, minimum marketable product, and minimum lovable product. So whenever you start your experience maps, you always want to aim for minimum lovable product. And only go to market or only launch it to your users when your product is ready and there are lovable features which users will really like and you give value add. But here is a paradigm. You are working on a same product which another organization is working on, and you guys are worried that I may lose the market. At that point of time, you may tend to shift towards minimum marketable product. So you can say, these many features we have 10 more features coming in down the road, so at least, you don't have to spend more money in getting customers later on. And finally, when you are really running against time and, you want to get some more funding, there can be different reasons, and then you go for minimum viable product. Hey, there is something you can eat, you will not die hungry. So, depending on your situation, you would know it better within your organization. No one situation is the same. So, just take all these variables into consideration when you are working on any of the product. Now, this is something which I'll say, do take a picture of it. I usually don't recommend, but do take a picture of this because it will kind of, when you are thinking about your product, think about what are your objective and goals of your product, go back, and then decide, start mapping it. So pick up, what I typically do is I take a product, take the top 5 features and start putting it with the sticky notes into different sections. And whichever area has the more sticky notes, I mean, sometimes you'll get a tie, but you can twice a coin then, but most of the times, it will give you a good idea what is an optimum time to launch because it gives you a good understanding about your product life cycle as well as the digital landscape or business landscape in which you are building that product or launching it out. I'll not get into the details, but I mean, there is benefits, it is quick to develop, it's relatively fast, slower because you have more features, it's more fancy, they may have custom build and all those things like that. Again, no emphasis on UX, UI most of the times. Some focus on just making some parts beautiful. So I would say more UI friendly, but this is delightful experience. And that's where we should aim for because, uh, when Natalie was also talking in the talk in the beginning, she was talking about a lot of times we don't think about customer experience and investing over there, but then we think about, customer support and we put in a lot more money because we did not do a feature properly. And now we have 10,000 service tickets coming in, and now we have to cater to all of those. So, you want to spend money then or now? Then, kind of moving to the next part, which is about the framework for pragmatic stories. So, we did talk about MVP. Now we have a good idea that when I should make a minimum lovable product, minimum viable product, or minimum marketable product. We know about Agile. We know how teams work. We know that time frame is the only thing which is constant across this whole Agile framework. So let's talk about when I'm fragmenting a story. And earlier, if you remember the very first slide when I was talking about, there's no time to do research. Let's try to take a deeper look. Can we still do research? So, I hope everybody knows the waterfall model, but just for everybody, you start with planning. You decide all the requirements. You do the design. You ship it off to a development team, and development team works on it, tests it out, and then there's a whole release phase where you test it and do a UAT, and your product gets launched. So back in the day when they used to do this, and if you remember UX, if you go into the history of UX, usability or human factors was the word which was introduced first, and user experience came quite later. And part of the reason of that also was because you had machines where you will interact with them, and ergonomics became very important in 80s, and then by 90s, human factors came into the term. And I think early 2000 user experience became more of a word, and then now with human-computer interaction we are talking about. So this seemed quite fine back in the day, but when I was talking about that designers were fitted into the Agile framework, so what happened when they broke this whole Agile waterfall model? They made an Agile framework where they kept some small portion of planning for a feature, and then what they did, they had some part for, okay, you know what, you can design here, you can develop, and you can test, and you can go further. You see all the blocks are of different varying sizes because of a feature can be small, big, and that is also to tell you not all the stories will have similar points, and that's where the point system and story points come into picture. Now, when you look over here, yeah, we do have time for design, but we have no time for research. But if you think about it, and even for a design, when you think about doing a complete feature, what you do is you fragment your feature with capabilities which you want to do for an interface into subsequent fragmented parts. Now, why can't we do the same with research? And let me talk about that aspect over here. So what we did when we had the similar situation where they said, well, everybody is working in Agile, just for 4 researchers who are engaged on different projects, we cannot change our timeline. There's Jira, which is put in a way. Developers have been working in a way. So again, we have to empathize with them and how we can retrofit ourselves together and work as a team. So we thought about, okay, you know what? I want to do, I have a hypothesis which I want to test with users. Let's make it very simple, exploratory study. So, oops. So, if you think about this entire 3 months duration, what we started doing, we decided while you are planning for the product, we plan our research plan. So towards the end of it, you know what they want to do, and you can subsequently plan for your research. The very first sprint, when somebody is going to make some low fidelity concept, think about designers showing it to developers and other people, getting a feasibility analysis. That can be your recruitment period, and preparing for a moderator's guide where you pick up an environment where you want to test, where you want to put that product. do a dry run. Do not, even if you think, oh yeah, I have all the screens, I have everything, do not test it within your design team or research team. I mean, yeah, of course, do it, but don't call it a dry run. Go outside UX team. I would highly recommend go and meet your QA team because they love to find problems and you want to identify the problems in your test cases or usability study before you go to the end user and you're stumbling over there. Conduct your research because now you have already started recruitment. So think about it. You have given it 1 month. So if you remember, every block is 15 days, around 2 weeks. So you have given 1 month to your recruitment people before you start conducting the study. So you will hardly seem to have problems where you can't find participants. You conduct your study. Once you conduct, you come back with your analysis and report. Now, when you are conducting research, at this point of time, you will start getting feedback, where I always recommend start doing some, readouts every week, do a mid-sprint presentation. And what helps, and when you do that, if the teams need to change or they need to do course correction, this is the right time. And think about this. Before launching a bad feature or a feature which is not usable, you have identified it and sorted it out over here. And the best part over here is, before something goes into market, and I'll tell you, we have now made a practice where we don't even give the feedback. What we do is, we'll have, sometimes when we get to visit to the users or we'll do a screen capture, we'll take the video or the user finding for a button or a user finding for a control, and we will just show it to the developers. And that speaks tons and tons of volume of why you are doing what you're doing is not right. And what that has done, it has developed a sense of more respect towards the researchers as well as designers, where people used to think, well, make the button blue. Why don't you move it to left? They started having lesser and lesser opinion, and they realized there's a reason, there is a logic, again, subconsciously how our mind works and how we look at things. So, there's those benefits which will come when you start thinking in this way. So this is an actual user interview we did with 20 participants. I had 2 researchers working on this project. Like I said, research plan, break it out. You are seeing design commit. And the other nice thing about this is you will have researchers actually sitting into the sprint planning. So a lot of times when you would see a lot of people losing their jobs, saying that well, research is not integrated, we don't understand what research is doing. In fact, ours is the team where developers would say, hey, I don't want to do something like for half a year just to know it's not working. Can we get those research team, or they call us UX UI researchers for some funny reason. So they acknowledging them is a big aspect, and the more you become part of it, you can close the feedback loop sooner. Now, I did talk about all of that. Now, depending on the product maturity, when you want to do experience map, there is a prerequisite which you definitely have to do. And, I've seen many a times with stakeholders, with product owners, a lot of times we just get some instructions or some suggestions from our stakeholders as in one-line statement. And I can guarantee you and tell you, you would have also seen a lot of people running with that one statement. And they don't want to go back to the leadership and question them, well, what is the value proposition? What do we want to achieve out of it? Just because you got, hey, we want to build nicer, fancy reporting solution. And that's it. Nobody questions anything. They keep doing it. So I always recommend whatever product you are working on, be it designer, be it researcher, be it product, you have to have a business model canvas. So when I say business model canvas, a good high-level idea about your product vision, who are your stakeholders, who are your key users, what value you are bringing to the market, what are your customer segments, what channels do you want to capture. And when you have these high-level competitors and other idea, you can use the exact same sheet when you get into introducing anybody to the team who is going to work on the product. If I just tell them, hey, we want to build a a fancy reporting solution. And what do we have to do for it? Well, we have to make a lot of reports, which has a lot of data visualization, and and maybe some AI ML, and put some fancy jazzy words. And rather than that, if I say, well, I want to build reports so that I can help dealerships make better decisions faster and generate revenue. Now, there is a value proposition. Now, you are looking at the end goal, which is improving the performance or improving the revenue of your end user, and you will work towards it rather than thinking about a fancy reporting tool. So look into that aspect. Business model canvas is very important. I'll share a real world example for you. It could be as simple as that. This was work in progress. This also gives you a high level idea. Sometimes, there are program managers, project managers, and some people only have some idea about these details. So we worked, we whiteboarded, we documented it, and we published it to the entire team, which kind of reduced the ambiguity. And when we started putting timelines to it, the moment a person who is working on the ground on that project will come back to you and say, hey, you have mentioned that everybody will do a single sign-on. We don't even have an infrastructure that I can do a single sign-on. Now, these realities, they come faster to you. And you are doing a more practical planning where your plan is very close to the execution model or what you want to achieve. Now, once you have that model then, if I go back and I talk about going back over here and I talk about the segment relationships and your customers, now what you do is you pick your customers and you get over here. Your customer comes over there. Now you think anything and everything from their perspective. Be so how hard or easy for you it is. You start from here. You mentioned the top 3, 4 scenarios. You go back to that value proposition, which you had mentioned when you had the product vision. So you go back to that version of it, look back. So typically what we do is we keep it on the left and look at the right, and we start building from there. So you're mapping that scenario, map that scenario, find your goals, what a user would be expecting. If needed, you can go to the market and do some ethnography and study, again, depending on the product life cycle, how much time you have. And then you start breaking down that journey. And there may be different ways they want to achieve it. And at every journey point, you see where the pain points are. Those are the definitely areas which you want to improve. And again, I'm not saying you will do all of this in one go, but when you list out that journey, and you put it together, then you have identified, okay, these are the areas I have to work on. And then you talk about opportunities and tag an ownership for everything. So sometimes you are working in a product where there is a dependency on other team. You put that, and there is a follow-up, and there is an ownership. So nothing gets lost just in conversation. Things get documented. And I can tell you, when something is written on a paper, it gives you 10 times more clarity rather than just talking about it. This is a simple experience map we did for a live project. And then if you look at front stage, everything was broken down. But in the backstage, we even went down to realize there's a lot of back-end work which goes through. So you do a workshop with your developers, how the APIs are coming in, how the data is flowing. Again, as a designer, you don't have to understand everything. But to a certain degree, when you understand things, you understand the feasibility, you tend to make better products which are more feasible, and how you can achieve that within that confined boundary of your timeline. So you don't stop there. Once you have that journey made, there are 2 scenarios. You either start with a new project, and when you start with a new project, it would look like this. But once your product has been there in the market for a while, and like we said, right, we want to continuously iterate and improve to give delightful experiences. So then what you do is you start looking for, in your journey, as technology is improving, as users are getting more advanced and expect more, you will start seeing where they are getting happy, where they are getting sad. So a lot of times you will end up getting sticky notes where you have recommendations, maybe recommendations which may be worked on, or think about scenarios which is not good. In fact, you will start noticing things when you do analytics. So we never noticed it until a user told us, well, we have to write HTTPS on your developer's platform page. And these minor small things, people develop perception about your product, and you will never know it. I mean, which designer will go and look into the web form till you're not like talking to the customers and doing that research? So this was extremely helpful. Now, some other suggestions which come in, and you put it down together. Now, what happens is when you have all these aspects which I was just talking about, you see these pointers? Now, rather than a product owner just going and writing everything on their own, and then later on you come and say, hey, well, I don't also understand what this product owner wants me to do. He keeps changing his requirement every other day. I show him something, and most of the times, you know what? He looks at my screens and then thinks what he wants as a requirement. And I can guarantee you most of the designers have faced that. And part of the reason is because when things become visual, people start to think, oh, how I can improve and make things better. But when you have data and some aspect, it puts a creative boundary around it. And now you and the product owner are kind of working on the same page. Again, I won't say that your product owner will not even give you any suggestion, but at least it would be reduced by at least 50%. And when you have less iterations where requirements continue to change, you will actually think more about the interaction patterns and everything, and in turn make a better product. So, a lot of times when we go into sprint, we focus too much on the planning side of things. And what we do is, well, what we want to do in sprint, we get hung onto the sprint, we develop, release, and we keep going through this cycle. Now, when you start your year or when you do your PI planning, you should actually focus here on the product backlog. And I'll talk about how you can even break this down and think about the backlog. Come to the sprint backlog, what you want to work on, and then do this. So you actually want to keep your focus here, not here. And when you will do that, you'll have better products. Now, when I was talking about backlog, right, you'll get few things which are coming out from when you talk to the users, what they are using, what they're not using, how their behavior is. So typically, you will have everything falling into this paradigm of known knowns and unknown unknowns. And when you start listing down these things, so things we are aware of and understand, these are the definitely easy ones which you want to sort out. There is a problem in your sign-in page. You know what is the problem. Better go and fix it. It's an easy, simple story which you can work on. Now that there is a drop-off rate which happens when somebody goes to XYZ page on your portal while doing a workflow or signing up or whatever your product is, but you do not understand why. Now, if you think about the PI planning, you want to focus your researcher to think and explore why are they dropping off. Because always remember, you want to work only on the things where you understand why you are doing what you are doing. And so goes for other things. And while doing the unknown knowns, you discover some unknowns, like all of a sudden you come to know, well, there is this code somebody needs to even proceed to the next step, which does not sit in a product, and you don't know whom to contact. Now, not everything is UX owned over here. So what happens if the sheer example which I was giving about, you can report it back to product, which will make sure that it gets passed on to the right team, which can move that needle over there. So, you all are kind of simultaneously working in the whole, team spirit to solve a problem. Another slide, again, you want to take a picture of this, occurrence and impact and knowns. So it will help you also thinking about when you're doing unknowns, when you're doing knowns, where if you have a hypothesis, how to work around that. And really, I try to put research exploration, or if there is an outage or an event which occurs, which is like you never thought of, those kind of fall under the unknowns aspect of it. So let's go further. So the whole idea when you are doing all of this is move things from unknown unknowns to unknown knowns, known unknowns, and then typically to known knowns. Keep doing this, you will make the best product in your life. But you will never be able to achieve it, so you keep improving. So, if you have heard that they say, you don't have to break anybody else's record, just keep breaking your records. And, it kind of goes to that philosophy. And finally, now I've seen Experience Map, I know Agile, I know DET. How do I apply in my work? So everybody is working in different projects, some in 2-week sprint, 3-week sprint, depending on the company. So I would say, looking at this model, look at this, always start, do you really understand your current landscape? Have you evaluated it properly? Do you know the timeframes and distributions on teams? Do you really know when the end date is? Do you have personas? Do you have business model? Do you know the known unknown quadrant? You want to set all this up and things which you don't have. And again, I would say do not just because you don't have a business model canvas. I mean, you would have to stop here. But let's say you do not have thought about the complete MLP as well as MVP strategy. What you can do is you can continuously iterate and work on it. But at least now you have an artifact which you can work on. And coming back over here, always make sure that you lead with this, and this always follows, rather than following and running behind the sprint and only looking at the backlog towards the end, or I need something to work on, picking something from here. So if you keep doing where you're leading, this follows, you'll have a great feature coming out of it. Now, how should your teams break the stories? My answer would be it depends. It completely depends on the team, the structure which you are working on, and it goes back to the entire Agile concept where a person can take one story point to do the same thing, and a person can take 2 story points to do the same thing. But it should not be 8 story points. So some people use poker method. Some people just have a designer, every team representing from one representative from every team come and talk about it, and that's how you fragment, and use this framework. So having said that, I will finally conclude by saying minimum lovable product is always better than minimum viable product. Always advocate for that. And like I said, right, we live in a gray world. It's not black and white. There may be reasons why you are doing an MVP or MMP, but make sure you understand it. Second aspect is clarity of product vision in the team will be directly proportional to the team's enthusiasm and collaboration. The more people know, the better developers know what is the end of the tunnel. They'll be more engaged, they'll collaborate better. And when everybody has a decent clarity into what you're building, everybody tries to work together. And you will have to have lesser meetings on team alignments and things of those nature. And finally, don't measure your product success and I mean, I don't know if we have Agile Scrum Masters also in the room, or somebody plays that pseudo role. A lot of times we think about product success in how fast we are delivering a story. So people who don't know about burn chart out rates, these are just fancy words. So we use the word called velocity. So how many stories or what is your burn down rate within a specified time period, they call it velocity. And finally, your product success should only be measured in what value you have delivered. And where you should look for that value? Business model canvas, where you had defined what were your value propositions and your product vision. So that's how you measure if you have achieved it or not. With that, thank you so much. I hope it was interesting, and I hope you all learned a lot. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, this is a great topic. Love that it was covered here. one thing that, I mean, it's great to see and see it presented in a way where it's maybe being exercised really well, or like, I feel like you shared a lot of like really ideal situations. What advice, maybe like a recommended, like if you could do anything to get, product design and research, maybe working towards a lot of like the agile flows that you were showing, flowing in this really good, healthy state, healthy backlogs, tackling debt. You shared a lot of things that are all really great things to think about, but what one thing might you recommend like a team tackle first, or like strongly consider, that has maybe the biggest impact in really helping getting agile teams aligned again? And
No, great question. I would always recommend to start with the business model canvas, and at least doing the experience map for your top 2 or 3, primary persona and secondary personas. And again, once you have the business canvas, everything is easy to, go from there. Think about, like if a building has a strong foundation, you can lay everything on the top. But the problem is, if you have, ambiguity from the beginning, the ambiguity just amplifies it, does not reduces. So think about, you have a lot of confusion from the beginning. At later stage, you try to improve it, it would never improve. And again, we all have been in colleges or schools at some point of time, and wherever you have a cumulative average or CGPA or GPA getting calculated, you screw up one semester, you keep recovering for it, and you can't do it. So do it right from the beginning, reduces the pressure, reduces the confusion, and then you're working more towards excelling rather than just making sure your GPA goes up.
My name's Lucas. I'm a UX designer for Costco Wholesale. And one thing that we have been trying to get up to speed with Agile for quite some time. We've switched operating models over the last 10 years about 2 different times. Last time it was the SAFe operating model. One thing I have seen to be a struggle is where the right time is to define done. I mean, what is the definition of ready for our UX designs? How does that fit into the backlog? And I guess, are we talking about doing like more lean UX as we step into sprints?
Yes.
So I think I have 3 questions there, sorry.
Okay, so definitely you are getting into more lean UX, and you have to, it's just by the nature. You will never have like so much enough time. But again, while you are doing lean UX, you have to also think about, you have to educate your different teams about UX as well. Not everybody understands that UX is not equal to UI. So, and part of the reason why I also support lean UX, well, if we are saying that there can be mistakes which could have been understood by stakeholders or product owner when they came up with the requirements, so they can go to market quickly or test the product with the users and have a continuous improvement, why can't that statement hold true for us? We had some assumptions when we started design. Again, think about design as, you are designing in a 2D world rather than a 3D world. So, we also make certain assumptions. Why not test our assumptions to begin with? I think it's a fair game for, as well as product, for us as well. There are 200 ways you can design the screens, but it's always good to test. So I'll suggest, it's good to test users. Launching a product and testing a product or testing a concept are 2 different things. So I'll always recommend that. Second aspect you were talking about, a lot of times I've seen in agile teams where they'll try to follow, they'll do good planning, but retro plays a very important role. And I've not gone into detail about retro, but if you look at retro, there's something called closing the loop, and we usually use that term when we are going to customers. Are we closing the loops as a pod team or as a design sprint or product team together? Let's say during retro, 5 points were raised, which are not going well. And a lot of times in agile scenarios, we'll talk about it and we'll just talk about it and leave it there. Did we put an actionable outcome or a step attached to it. And what I do as a matter of sanity, whenever we do, and again, this is how I measure success of my team. We have a big Miro board where we have multiple teams, and they put things which are going well, not going well, continue doing. And if you start that sanity, there would be a time after 1.5 years, nobody will say that we are doing great. You will see there are less sticky notes in stop doing and more things in continue doing. And that's how you kind of measure. And the other thing is when you do those retros, like there may be some unique problems which I'm not aware of or which we just oversee. I think those problems will surface up, and I think that would be the right approach if you think about that is where if I have to start, that's where I will be starting without doing too much disruption into something which is already happening. And what was the third question? Yes.
We know the UX design is ready for development, handoff for development, or is that in the backlog that we get that done?
Well, none of the questions are going into the stream unless we get into the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Because we got a lot of virtual audience.
Yeah, so.
We're not able to get any of that in. But we are also past time
Okay.
as well. So possibly any other additional questions could come and greet you at the stage. And
Awesome.
we'll be in a break until 2:45.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe, and thank you for Blink for organizing this. Thank you.